guys. All right. So we've got kind of a fun day planned. I'm kind of sad that I don't get to be there. And by fun, it's definitely still language arts. But once you guys get through the first part of this lesson, which are these slides, you get to watch a video. It's 26 minutes long. More than likely, you won't be able to finish it. But it's 26 minutes long, and it's talking about medicine during the Middle Ages. So not only are we talking about bloodletting, we're also talking about like what do people do when they have a broken bone or they have a fever or whatever. It's really, really interesting and kind of teeters along the line of absolutely fascinating, like you can't turn away, but also a little bit kind of disgusting, like what in the world. So something to look forward to. So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, why are we reading Castle Diary again? We've already finished it. Remember, our end game is that we are going to be writing a narrative story from the perspective of a doctor or a different person about bloodletting. And so today's lesson, what that's going to be is it's just using information that you already know about with Castle Diary, but we're going to be talking about different perspectives. So buckle in and here we go. All right, first of all, you need to open up your journals. Today's date is 11/3/25, or if you're fancy, November 3rd, 2025. And you're going to answer two questions, and I want you guys to write 2 sentences per question. So the first question asks, what does a diary reveal to the reader? And reveal is just a fancy word for show. So what does a diary show to the reader? And then the second question is, what does a diary hide from the reader? And you guys can go ahead and pause this video in just a second while you guys are writing, but be prepared to share your answers. If you need a little bit of an incentive, you can show the guest teacher where my wow jar is, and you guys can kind of sneak into that. So 2 sentences per question. Go ahead and pause and answer this. All right, so our next thing is you are going to go ahead and grab Castle Diary, and you are going to open up to pages 31 through 34. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read this out loud to you, and it's Tobias's interactions with the cook. And he doesn't have like the greatest interaction with him. I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud to you. Okay, and while I am reading it out loud, you can also be looking up at the screen because the questions, and you can pause this too, are from whose perspective is this interaction told? So whose eyes are this interaction being told? And then if this interaction were described from the cook's perspective, how would it be different? So be prepared to answer those 2 questions. Here we go, page 31, February 6th, Tuesday. Back to the schooling this day. Sitting in the cold keep fair freezed me to the bone, so when lessons were ended, I slipped into the kitchen. While thawing in its warmth, I watched a kitchen lad making pie shells, which he did call coffins. Not many minutes had passed before the cook espied me heating myself by the bread oven. He asked my business there, and when he learned that I had no task, said, "There is no room in my kitchen for useless bodies," and set me to copying from a pile of recipes that he had. They were much splattered, and a few even smelled of the dishes they described. Some were most strange, especially a salad made with coxcombs and hen's feet. For writing on, cook gave me some old scraps of parchment. Many had to be scraped clean before I could use them again. February 13th, Tuesday. Before lessons, I went again to warm myself in the kitchen and watched while cook made bread. He and his helpers start work before dawn, and the kitchen was a busy, bustling place. Cook mixes water and flour with barm. This last stuff he gets from the brewess in the village, who calls it yeast. Her work is to make ale for the castle, and as it brews, she scoops off the barm that floats on top as foam. This barm forms bubbles that swell the dough, making the bread light. Cook kneads the dough in a trough made of the hollowed-out half of a tree trunk, and then shapes it into loaves and leaves it to rise. February 14th, Wednesday. Cook showed me today how they bake bread. A kitchen lad lights the oven early on baking days so that it is hot when the loaves are ready for baking. He begins by burning candles of sticks and then throws in a log or 2. As soon as the oven glows over all, he scoops out the embers, brushes out most of the gray ash, and then wipes the oven floor with a wet mop. The oven hisses mightily, and steam issues from its mouth like the breath of a dragon. Cook then sets the loaves into the hot oven with a wooden shovel he calls a peel. They bake here 3 kinds of bread. Cook made me miniature loaves of each sort, and all the kitchen staff rested at their work to watch me taste them. The best, called manchette, is made from sifted wheaten flour and is the white bread we eat in Hall. The second, brown cheap bread, I knew also, for I have seen some of the servants eat it. The last, which I did not know, they call Brahm bread. It was horrible, and I spat it out, which caused great mirth among those who watched. I learned later that only dogs and horses eat such bread. It is baked to use up the bran the miller sieves out from the wheat when he makes white flour. At such ill use, I ran out of the kitchen and vowed not to go back there, even if the ice freezes off all of my fingers. All right, so whose perspective is this interaction told? That should be an easy one. And then the second one is, if this interaction was described from the cook's perspective, how might it be different? Go ahead and turn to a neighbor really quickly. Describe how it might be different, and then be prepared to be called on so you can share it with the class. Pause here as necessary. All right. So this one, we're not going to use a piece of paper, but this one, what I want you guys to do is take a look on page 31. There is this quote from Cook that says, "There is no room in my kitchen for useless bodies." What does this quotation reveal about the cook? Why do you think Tobias includes this single quotation from the cook? Because remember, Tobias is writing this diary. He could put whatever the heck he wanted in here. Why did he choose to do this one quote? And what might Tobias have left out of his description of this interaction? So you'd have to infer based on what we kind of know about the Middle Ages and Tobias and the cook. What might he have left out? Go ahead and turn to people at your desk, discuss these 3 questions, and then be prepared to share with the class. Pause here as necessary. All right, so now this question is, what perspectives are missing from the depiction of medieval life in Castle Diary? So we know Tobias's perspective of this whole entire thing. I want you guys to think of, where do you think Tobias is on the hierarchy? Is he a peasant? Is he a tradesperson? Is he a noble? Is he a knight? Where does Tobias fit on this hierarchy? And hopefully you guys have figured it out that he's pretty high up, right? His uncle is nobility. His uncle is a lord. And so he's not sitting down at the peasants. Do we hear perspectives of peasants? Do we hear perspectives of tradespeople? The answer is no. So which perspectives are missing? Go ahead and tell your neighbor. Be prepared to share. So we're going to talk about a word called privilege. Privilege is a noun. It says a right or a benefit given to some people but not to others. So a privilege, a lot of the times people are born into privilege. A lot of the times people know specific people, and so they are given privileges. If I talk about my husband and myself, my husband and I both grew up in Lakeville, but we both had very, very different privileges. For me, my family took me on vacations. That was a privilege given to me that my parents were able to afford. My husband, his vacations were to his grandma and grandpa's in Missouri, in which they drove there. It was a very different vacation because his privilege was different. So I want you guys to go ahead and open up to your social hierarchy organizer in your Learn book and ask yourself these 3 questions. How does Tobias's privilege shape the story he tells in the diary? Right? If this was told by a peasant, would this be told differently? If this is told like from a servant who was working in the castle, would the story be different? Where would Tobias go on the hierarchy? So if you're looking up here, king, nobility, wealthy civilian, tradespeople, or peasant, where do you think he goes? And then how does Tobias's role as the writer of his diary impact the reader, what the reader learns about castle life in Castle Diary? Do we truly learn everything there is to know about the castle with Tobias telling us this story? You guys can go ahead and answer these questions as a class. You can share with a partner, however you decide. Also, go ahead and put Tobias on our hierarchy with a symbol of wherever you decide that he wants to go. And once you guys have gone through this and completed it, it is time for the video. Woohoo!